بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Now before we look at this week's topic, I'll just give a quick recap or a quick reminder of the sequence of events from the moment Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be a prophet, to be a messenger who will convey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words and message to the entire mankind and to the entire universe. Now, as I mentioned before, that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam received bi'sat or prophethood at the age of 40, initially Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told by Allah that he should convey the message of Islam only to his family members, only to his friends and his trusted allies. And the wisdom or the hikmah behind that is that whenever you start something new off, whenever there is a new religion, a new organization, you need what we call the base. You need a strong group of people. And if the base or if the foundation of that organization or of that religion is strong, then the fruits of that particular religion will blossom in the future. But first and foremost, you need the base and you need the foundation. So therefore, when we look at the initial people to convert to Islam, we find Hazrat Khadija anha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We find Hazrat Ali anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's cousin brother. We find great personalities like Hazrat Hamza anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncle. And we find Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's close friend and ally, Hazrat Abu Bakr anhu. These were the initial people to convert to Islam. Other Sahaba as well, but these were the main ones. So you have a new religion based on people whose taqwa and piety and righteousness was of the next level. Khadija radiallahu anha, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Ali radiallahu anhu, and so on and so forth. The whole wisdom behind that is so that when you have a group of people, a pool of people who are very strong in their iman, who are very strong in their piety and taqwa, then what happens is that the fruits of that religion, the faida and the benefit of that religion will continue for many, many years and many, many generations. And the same also goes for, if you want to look at a comparison or an example, if you look at any organization which starts off, when they start off, there's only one or two people. But these one or two people were very, very dedicated. They sacrificed their time, they sacrificed their sleep, they sacrificed their wealth. And that's why when we see many, many years later, these small organizations are now big, massive companies. But when they started off, there was only one or two people. And that's with every Jamaat or every kind of organization. You only have a handful of people starting off, but as long as these people are dedicated, then in the future the reward, the fruit will blossom. So exactly same with Islam. When he started off, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't want to now tell Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam openly preach about Islam when firstly Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself and the companions, in terms of their yaqeen, was not still of a high status. Obviously they still had that yaqeen, that certainty, but it wasn't like ayni yaqeen, it wasn't haqqa yaqeen. They had the yaqeen that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a true prophet and messenger, but it wasn't of a really, really high state. So when they were themselves, their spirituality, their piety, taqwa wasn't of a high state, how they're going to now go and convey the message of Islam to the Arabs, to the pagans who for thousands and thousands of years were worshipping idols and so on. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the companions, just keep Islam amongst family and friends, amongst your trusted allies. Tell no one outside your friends and your family circle about Islam. And this happened for 3 years. Just Islam, only a handful of people knew about it. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered that now go and tell everyone, tell the tribes of Arabia, tell the Quraysh, tell the pagans of Makkah about Islam. And it was only at that time, that's when the resistance started. And I mentioned before that the pagans of Makkah, the Quraysh, they tried to stop the flow of Islam firstly by trying to tempt Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with wealth, with women, with kingdom, with hukumat. When that failed, then they started persecuting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They started persecuting the Sahaba, the companions, which led to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam permitting or allowing 2 groups of Sahaba, 2 Jamaat, to migrate from Makkah to Ethiopia, to Abyssinia. And last week's lesson we were looking at the story, in particular the inspirational speech by Hazrat Ja'far al-Anhu in front of Najashi, the emperor of Ethiopia. So this was the situation of the Muslims at that time. Now, as I mentioned before, that this dunya which we are living in, and in particular those who are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at that time, the most closest people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, the companions. And it's mentioned in the hadith that the more closer you are to Allah, the more you are tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the persecution the Muslims were going through, the musibah they were going through, the parishani they were going through, this was all part and parcel of being a Muslim. As Allah says in the Holy Quran, Alif Lam Mim, ahasiba an-nas an yutraku an yaqulu amanna wa hum la yuftanun. Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when a person says amanna, when a person says I believe in Allah, does that believer now think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to let him go? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to let him off? وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ, without testing him. So being a Muslim, part and parcel of our religion, of our deen, is that we'll be tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, the companions, they were tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But life is all tests. There is always an incident, there is always something will happen where the difficulties the Muslims were going through, they could then see some light at the end of the tunnel. And remember this, that all the difficulties we go through in life is always temporary. It's never ever going to be permanent. There's always going to be something that even though we're going through difficulties, we could still see the light at the end of the tunnel. There will always be that hope where you could cling on, where you could long for that, okay, a time will come when everything will be better. Now exactly here with the Muslims as well, that you need to understand the Muslims, they were being tortured, the taqaleed they were going through, the musibah, the parishani they were going through, there was kind of no way out. Many people were kind of questioning that, what have we done? We let go of our forefathers' religion, we have accepted Islam, but since we've accepted Islam, there's always been difficulties. There was left, right and center, so much difficulties they were going through, and at that moment in time, there was no kind of light at the end of the tunnel. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made something happen. And when this incident happened, then the Sahabas who were there at that time, they then could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they could cling on to this particular incident. And the incident which I'm going to talk about in today's lesson is the Islam, or is the converting of Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu. Is when Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu converted to Islam, that's when the Sahaba, the weak Sahaba at that time, what I mean weak, not weak in terms of the Iman and belief, but weak in terms of they had no family background, like I mentioned before, regarding Hazrat Ammar bin Yasir anhu, Hazrat Bilal anhu, that's when they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I'll try to, it's going to be difficult for us to understand what Hazrat Umar anhu's conversion to Islam did for the morale of the Muslims at that time. And if I want to use the example, it's like, say, a president of a country, a king of a country becoming Muslim. Let's say there's a country and there's not that many Muslims there, and just imagine that king of the country or that president of the country says, I've now become a Muslim. You could imagine the excitement, the feeling, the happiness, the joy the small group of Muslims would have in that particular country. Now in Arabia in those days, the Quraysh, they were like the superpower. They had all the power, they had all the might. I mentioned the reason why, about the story of the elephants and so on. So Arabia, they had the monopoly. They had total control. All the tribes were subservient to them. Everyone respected the Quraysh. They were like the superpower at that time. And Hazrat Umar anhu, he was one of the main players of the Quraysh, and also on top of that, he was well respected and he was feared by everyone in Arabia. If you heard of Hazrat Umar anhu's name, people would be scared of Hazrat Umar anhu. Even the non-believers, they were so scared of Hazrat Umar anhu. That's how much robe and how much respect he had. So Hazrat Umar anhu was feared by everyone. He was respected by everyone. He was from the Quraysh. He had, the lineage, the ancestry kind of line behind him. Everyone looked up to Hazrat Umar anhu. So you could imagine that when Hazrat Umar anhu announced his conversion to Islam, the morale he did for the Muslims at that time, they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. They could see that these kind of difficulties we're going through is going to one day come to an end and will come to a stop. Now initially, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in private would do dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, O Allah, help Islam or assist Islam either through Abu Jahl or through Umar bin Khattab anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would always make this dua, especially in the hadith of Tirmidhi and Musnad Ahmad. Thereafterwards, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told by Allah that Abu Jahl is not going to convert to Islam, that Hidayah is not written in his taqdeer and in his faith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then specifically would make dua for Hazrat Umar anhu. And it's mentioned in the hadith of Ibn Majah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would always say, or in his dua, he would make this dua, Allahumma ayyid al-Islam bi Umar bin Khattab khasatan. So Allah assist Islam, help Islam through Umar bin Khattab anhu. So initially after Allah made dua for both Abu Jahl and for Umar bin Khattab anhu, but later on the dua was just exclusively and specifically made for Umar bin Khattab anhu. Now when we look at the story of Hazrat Umar anhu, there's two things here. One is the actual cause of him converting to Islam, and one is the apparent cause of him converting to Islam. One is the hakiki sabab of him converting to Islam, and one is the zahiri sabab of him converting to Islam. Now the hakiki sabab, or the actual cause of Hazrat Umar anhu converting to Islam, is the dua which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made for him. If Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for you, then you know it's going to be guaranteed that it's going to be accepted. And that's why, there's that dua Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to make for us, for our intercession in the hereafter, which is going to be accepted by Allah. So that is the actual cause, the hadith sabab of Hazrat Umar anhu converting to Islam. But the zahiri sabab, the apparent reason or cause for Hazrat Umar anhu converting to Islam, is a story which Hazrat Umar anhu narrates himself, which can be found in the books of hadith like Musnad al-Bazzar, Imam Tabrani's book and also in Sunan Daraqutni, that Hazrat Umar anhu narrates that once upon a time, he was a staunch enemy of Islam, a staunch enemy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before he converted, he was an enemy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, enemy of Islam, what Islam was teaching. He hated everything about Islam. That's how strong his hatred and his hatred was against Islam, against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and against those people who converted to Islam, who let go of their forefathers' religion and converted to this new religion. Now Hazrat Umar anhu then narrates that once Abu Jahl, he made the announcement, and he said that, Na'udhu billah, whoever can bring me the head of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whoever can kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I will give this person 100 camels. Abu Jahl made this announcement and made this alarm. Now Hazrat Umar anhu, he then went to Abu Jahl and he said to Abu Jahl that, are you serious? Like, if I was to, na'udhu billah, kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would you give me 100 camels? Are you serious or are you just making this up? And Abu Jahl said to Umar anhu that, no, I'm serious. If you can kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then I will guarantee that I will give you 100 camels. So Hazrat Umar anhu went home, he got his knife, he got his sword, he got all the things which he needed, and he then went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house. Now on the way, mentioning this hadith that Hazrat Umar anhu, he saw a calf. And Hazrat Umar anhu narrates that this calf just came out of nowhere, and it seemed that this calf was actually speaking to me. Like, this calf was actually saying some words, and these words were actually being addressed to me. And it's mentioned in the hadith that this calf was saying that, O son of Khattab, why are you going to kill a person, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is inviting you towards falah, who is inviting you towards success, success in this world and the hereafter. Now when Hazrat Umar anhu, when he heard this, he was a bit kind of perplexed that, okay, this calf speaking to me, what should I do here? Now obviously Hazrat Umar anhu is thinking to himself that, look, I can't now go back to Makkah, go back and say, oh, I can't kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam anymore because this calf has said no, because people will think I'm nuts, I've lost my mind, this calf speaking to me. So he obviously ignored what the calf said, but he then went away and he then started proceeding with the journey. But it is mentioned that it was actually true, that what this calf said, the calf actually spoke to Hazrat Umar anhu. But Hazrat Umar anhu didn't want to actually go back and say, oh, this calf told me not to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this calf actually said to Hazrat Umar anhu not to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now obviously, these kind of things, miracles do happen when there's a prophet or when there's a Nabi around. So this calf actually said to Hazrat Umar anhu not to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Hazrat Umar anhu proceeded with the journey, and on his way he then met someone called Na'im bin Abdullah who had converted to Islam. And Na'im bin Abdullah, he asked Umar anhu that, where are you going? You look a bit angry today. Where are you going? So Hazrat Umar anhu said that I'm going to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house, na'udhu billah, to kill him. So Na'im bin Abdullah then said to Umar anhu that, first and foremost, I think you should go and sort out your household. Then Hazrat Umar anhu said to Na'im bin Abdullah, what do you mean sort out my household? Then Na'im bin Abdullah said to Umar anhu that, don't you know your sister, whose name was Fatima bint Khattab anha, and your brother-in-law, Sa'id bin Zayd, your sister's husband, they have converted to Islam. So Hazrat Umar anhu now got so angry, instead of now going to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house, he's now making his way to his sister's house. And what we can understand from here is that first and foremost, we should always think about ourselves and more importantly, our family. We always like to look at other people's family, or look at his son, he's doing this, look at his daughter, she's doing this, she's doing that. Whereas in our household, our sons are doing probably things worse than that person's son is doing. Our daughters are doing things which are 10 times worse than what that person's daughter is doing. But we don't look at our daughters, we don't look at our sons. We think they're angels, we think that no, they're ma'asum, they're sinless, they can't be wrong, and other people are wrong. It always happens that we always try to look at faults in others, and we don't look at faults in ourselves or in our family. And always keep this in mind that no one is perfect, no one is ma'asum, and there's this saying in Arabic where it says that the same way everyone has faults, it then goes on to say that people, their eyes are bigger. Now what's trying to say is that people's eyes are bigger. He's trying to say is that the same way you try criticizing people, they got eyes and they could also see your faults as well. Now we always try to think, oh, he's like this, he's like that. That brother, he's also got eyes as well. But his eyes could also detect the fault in you. So what I'm trying to say is that always, first and foremost, not to criticize people, not to kind of lament people for anything wrong they're doing, whereas you yourself are not perfect in that particular field. So this is what Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu, when he heard that his sister had converted to Islam, he thought, forget Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I need to sort my household first. So he then went to his sister's house. Now it's mentioned that when Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu was approaching his sister's house, there was a Sahabi in the name of Hazrat Khabbab ibn Anhu. And he was teaching Fatima, Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu's sister, and her husband, Sa'id bin Zayd. He was teaching them some portion of the Holy Quran. Now when Hazrat Khabbab ibn Anhu heard Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu's footsteps, approaching the house and his voice calling out towards Fatima, Hazrat Khabbab ibn Anhu quickly left that place and he hid in a corner. As I mentioned before, Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu, everyone was scared of Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu. So when Hazrat Khabbab ibn Anhu heard Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu, coming to the house, that's he just did a quick legger. So basically, just to put it, so he just did one. So that's how everyone is scared of Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu. Even mentioned the hadith, even Shaitan is scared of Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu. So everyone was scared. So when he heard, when Hazrat Khabbab ibn Anhu heard that Umar ibn Anhu was coming, he hid in the corner, and Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu, he knocked on the door, he then came in, and he asked Fatima, his sister, and Sa'id bin Zayd, that I've heard that you have converted to this new religion, that you have become apostate, or you have left your forefathers' religion, and you have now become Muslims. Now when Hazrat Fatima and Sa'id bin Zayd confirmed what Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu heard, Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu then pounced on Sa'id bin Zayd and started beating him up. Started like hitting him, started beating him up. His sister Fatima ibn Anha tried to stop them, tried to intervene, but she also got hit as well. Now when Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu's sister got hit, Fatima, she then said to her brother Umar ibn Anhu that, O son of Khattab, you could do whatever you want. It's not going to change us because we have embraced Islam and we are not going to leave Islam even though you could kill us, even though you will beat us up. We're not going to leave the religion of Islam. We're not going to leave this religion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now when Hazrat Fatima said this, Umar bin Khattab ibn Anhu, firstly he was shocked. Now why was he shocked? He was shocked because in those days, a younger sister would never reply or would never answer back to her elder brother. In those days, the wife would never answer back to the husband. Those days, the younger sister would never answer back to her elder brother, in particular Umar ibn Anhu. She would never ever answer back. Now when Hazrat Umar ibn Anhu heard that younger sister saying, you could do whatever you want, we're not going to leave Islam, he was shocked that my younger sister, she never ever looked at me. That's how much fear I had, that's how much rope I had that, whenever she would walk past, she would keep her gaze down. it's like sometimes when you're scared of someone, when someone has a robe, you don't look at them out of respect and their robe. So my sister here never looked at me once in her life. Now today she's kind of answering back to me. So the one was shocked at what's happening here, that this younger sister answering back to me. So first there was that shock, then there was that embarrassment that Hazrat Umar was beating up, the younger sister. Because obviously Hazrat Umar being a warrior, it's not considered to be hard, it's not considered to be manly, it's not considered to be tough that you beat up women. It's considered hard and manly and tough that you beat up other men, but not women. So Hazrat Umar was embarrassed that he actually, gave a whack to his sister. But then afterwards, Hazrat Umar's embarrassment then turned to curiosity. That, what is this religion which has basically instilled this kind of strength in my little sister, where she was able to answer back to me, and she's able to say that, look, you can do whatever you want, we're not going to leave this particular religion. So Hazrat Umar then asked his sister Fatima that, can I have a look at what you were reading? So when Hazrat Umar said this, and obviously when he said this, there was this kind of change in his tone that he probably wants to know about Islam. Hazrat Khabbab who was hiding, he then came and he said to Umar that you can't touch the scriptures, I won't give you the scriptures yet unless you wash yourself, unless you become clean. In another hadith it mentions that it was actually his sister Fatima was saying to Umar that you're impure, you're nafas, you're najas, you can't touch the Quran unless you wash yourself. And then there are two narrations. One narration goes on to say that Umar then went and did wudu and came back. In another narration he goes on to say that Umar went, performed ghusl and then came back. So Umar was then given the beginning verses of Surah Taha. And then when Hazrat Umar reached the verse where it said, Innani ana Allah, la ilaha illa ana fa'budni wa aqimi salata li dhikri. Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, Innani ana Allah, that I am Allah, la ilaha illa ana. There is no God besides me. Fa'budni, so therefore worship me, wa aqimi salata li dhikri, and perform and establish salah for my remembrance. Now when Hazrat Umar read obviously from the beginning of Surah Taha until that particular verse, he then stopped and he said that these words are not the words of any human being. These words are some amazing words. It has to be of a supernatural being. These words are. These words cannot be from a magician, as he always thought he was. These words cannot be of a bashar, cannot be of a human being like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but these words are in fact the words of a supernatural being. So hadith that goes on to say that Umar after finishing off reading the paragraph, the chapter, he then went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house. When he knocked on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually within Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah was actually in a place called Darul Arqam, where the Muslims at that time would kind of gather for mashwara, for meetings. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knocked on the door. The people asked, who is it? As Umar replied, it's me, Umar. So the Sahabas who were inside at that time, they were, again, had that fear, so they were a bit scared that should they open the door or not. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said, open the door. So Hazrat Umar entered, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam got hold of Hazrat Umar kurta, his kameez, and he said to Hazrat Umar accept Islam. Hazrat Umar then accepted Islam. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the top of his voice called out the takbir, said Allahu Akbar loudly when Hazrat Umar accepted Islam. And it's mentioned in a hadith narrated by Ibn Abbas that when Hazrat Umar became a Muslim, or when he converted to Islam, all the angels in the heavens were overjoyed. They were so happy when Hazrat Umar became a Muslim. And as I mentioned that, what it did for the morale at that time, because when Hazrat Umar converted to Islam, the Muslims now were more open and they were freely able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were now able to actually go into the haram, worship Allah, and fear no kind of reprisal from anyone. Because what happened before, And we mentioned the story about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He tried to pray namaz in the haram, but the pagans of Makkah, Uqbah bin al-Mu'ayid, tried strangling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These things were common. But when Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu converted Islam, that's it. Any kind of fear they had now, any kind of like hope or fear of reprisals or anything, all went away. They Aram said now were able to go to the haram, pray salah, do whatever they wanted, because they knew that if anybody was to do anything to them, they could call Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu and say, look, I've got Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu behind me. So that's what it did for the morale of the Muslims at that time. You see, they were talking to us.